Hello, and welcome to another episode of the podcast where we will reassure you that football is fixable. Alright, Dan, how are you?
Alright, James, yes, I'm very well, thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. All the better. Sess isn't here today, so that's good, isn't it?
Yeah, we must try not to go on too long. We are.
He does get upset with us, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's like our referee, isn't he? Yeah. Let's be honest, we need it. You know, we're like, 5-year-old, 30-odd-year-old men, so, yeah.
Oh, don't say that. No. He won't let that go. But as he's not here, I think we've got free reign over what we talk about, so, yeah. I think we'll have to think about what topic we want to do today. What should we fix? But first of all, I've got a bit of news, Dan.
Oh, really?
So it's been the last couple of weeks. We missed the news last week for various reasons. So this week we've got to kind of talk about the big topics over the last couple of weeks. Did you hear? So in the last week's, this is 2 weeks ago now, we had another vote come through related to Man City's hearing. Did you hear about the Associated Party Transactions, APT vote? So Man City, as well as the 115 charges they're currently being investigated in, there's a hearing on, they've also been looking at what the rules should be around sponsorship deals and whether Man City are getting a fair value for because they're state-owned, they kind of have businesses under their umbrella and everything, so they're giving more money to their club than perhaps they should have via disguising it as a sponsorship. That's the kind of claim, and City are defending against that, where they lost the vote a couple of weeks ago. So it's quite a big kind of result, victory for the Premier League. Did you catch that one? Are you pleased with that?
I did indeed. Yeah, there was 4 teams or something voted in favour and everyone else voted against or something?
Yeah, that's right.
I think
that's right. Yeah, 16 teams were voting against it. The sides that were on the same side, I think, was.
I think Newcastle were one, weren't they? Because that's obviously going to massively help them out. I can't remember the other two. One was quite surprising, I think. But yeah, I mean, I find it strange that this is obviously something that's been going on for a long time, and it's kind of like, why is it only being dealt with now? Like, the thing for me is, like, I know everyone's like, 115 charges and everything, but you also got to look at the Premier League for letting them do it for so long. Like,
yeah, I know.
This should have been nipped this should have been nipped in the bud like ages ago. Rather than letting it go to this level, and now it's become this massive thing just because it was not dealt with. And
I think one thing is, it goes to the hearing, doesn't it? But then if the result doesn't go one way, that side then appeals. So then they have to have a hearing on the appeal, it seems. So it sort of goes, it's endless. But the 4 teams were, Villa, Newcastle, Forest, all sided with Man City. So Man City being the 4th side. So
right, I see.
There we go. Aston Villa, Newcastle and Forest.
Yes, okay. That makes sense. Although the Villa one surprises me a bit.
To be able to decide their own sponsorship.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate. Say that again.
The Villa one surprises me a bit. I'm surprised on why they would. But I know that obviously Forest, I think, at the minute, they would vote against anything against the Premier League. I think they just hate the Premier League, don't they?
All-out war against the Premier League.
Yeah, that's what it feels a bit like that. But, yeah, I mean, it
feels for the greater good, doesn't it? It feels
100%.
Like it's a win for the Premier League.
100%.
So that they can't kind of inflate the sponsorship and get more money than they perhaps should.
100%. I'm surprised Ted Bowley didn't vote against, though, because didn't he sell his hotel? Didn't sell his hotels or something to the club or something like that? Or he bought some land or sold some land because he owned some land close to the Stamford Bridge or something, sold it to the club for PSR and stuff like that. So obviously he's done some dodgy things as well, hasn't he? So I'm surprised he didn't vote that way, but obviously he's got a more creative way of these kind of cooking the books.
That's the thing, it's cooking the books. It's the loopholes, isn't it? So we say sort of dodgy, but technically there isn't anything wrong with it until it goes to these hearings and it's actually now voted against. So the Premier League's now able to become a bit stricter on it. So that's a win in that sense. At least clubs won't be able to inflate those. In other news, we've got a post this week, or this last week I should say, came up with the biggest followings of the teams in the Premier League, right? So who has the bigger followings? Where would you put your money then, Dan?
Where did this news come from?
So this is it's a league. It's been, so I'll give you an idea. So it's on social media. So the figures in the article take into account. So this is on Give Me Sport, and it was published it last week, and it was taken into account followers from Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X, formerly known as Twitter.
Okay.
Who do you think tops the charts in the following count?
Well, it's being brought up in the news by you, so I bet it's Arsenal.
Oh, I was going to say it's Man United, but fine, you know what? Fine. Man United are the top with 214.7 million followers across those platforms.
It's very gracious of you to bring it up then. I take back everything I've said.
What I found funny was on one of the comments underneath this post, presumably disgruntled Liverpool fan, said, Liverpool have the most loyal fans, and that is more than numbers. Which I'm not sure how you measure that, but okay. No, Liverpool weren't first, as we know now. So where do you think Liverpool were?
Liverpool, they're going to be in the top 4, I reckon, but I don't think they'll be.
That's true. Yeah, they are in the top 4.
Are they 4th?
They're actually 4th.
Oh,
they are.
Look at that.
They're just above. They're a bit above Arsenal. So second place is Man City, which is a sad, depressing thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, you're talking about social media followers, aren't you? So I suppose that's like a whole different breed of thing anyway. Like I can imagine. Yeah,
it's a new generation as well, isn't it? Yeah. Some of those, like when you think TikTok, for example. Did I say TikTok was on that list, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And predominantly the followers on TikTok are, in their 20s and stuff, their teens and 20s and things like that. And they've grown up watching City winning everything. So it kind of shows in that sense. So Man City is second. So it's the 2 Manchester clubs. Third place is Chelsea. This is making me more and more upset, actually.
I'm surprised by that.
So yeah, Man City are on 152.6 million followers on those platforms, and Chelsea are 141.9 million.
Wow.
And then Liverpool only just behind Chelsea, according to this, so 141.6. Then Arsenal bring the top 5, round off the top 5, I should say, with 104.6 million. Then Spurs are on 98.5 and so on. And then it's a massive drop after that. So there's a big 6, if you like. Goes down to 7th place is Leicester City with 22.8, and then the next biggest. So it's a massive drop. So yeah, it's great to see Leicester sort of in the top 7, if you like, but there's a massive drop between the top 6 and 7th place.
To be fair, given City's history with sort of doing business with themselves and everything, I wouldn't be surprised if like 500,000 of those people were fake accounts set up by South.
Yeah, just from their partnerships and various businesses and things, duplicated and things.
Yeah, exactly. So who knows what the real number is.
And I've got one other final bit of news. I don't know if you have any news you want to bring up in a moment, but so Man City have been on this great run. Really bad run.
Yes, yeah.
So Man City haven't won for 6 games. They got beaten by Tottenham twice, including one in the EFL Cup, losing 2-1. They lost to Sporting Lisbon. That was Zamarim's last game for them, wasn't it? They've lost to Brighton, and they've lost to Bournemouth in that time, and then they drew 3-3, being 3-0 up as well in the last Champions League round against Feyenoord. So they're on a bit of a dodgy run at the moment.
They're having a tough time, aren't they?
Yeah, it's not funny at all. But San Marino, in the last month, so in November, San Marino have actually won a game. Did they win 2 games in the end? I think they might have won 2 games. And they ended up getting promoted in their What's it called? They got promoted in their Nations League group up to the next group. Yeah. And San Marino have kindly they mentioned to Man City, can we play you? They've had more wins in November than Man City have. San Marino.
I think, to be fair, I wouldn't be surprised if City turned it down. I'm sure they'd be worried about that kind of form.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's good form, isn't it? So San Marino, I did actually have their stats here somewhere or other, where they haven't won in 100 and something fixtures, and then the last sort of couple of Nations League rounds, they've drawn and won a couple, which has completely changed their fortunes around. So fair play to them. So well done, San Marino. Maybe we'll get that game against City at one point. Right. Well, let's get into the main episode then. Right, Dan. Today then, we are fixing Man United, your club.
It's about time. It's needed.
It's about time. I'm sorry we delayed it this long. If we did it a bit earlier, Ten Hag might still have his job.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, actually, no, unbeknownst to the listeners, we have tried this before, and it's actually my fault because of technical difficulties that it didn't go out. So basically, the weight of the club is on my shoulders. I apologise.
Yeah, so it's your fault that Ten Hag got sacked.
No.
You heard it here first, folks. Well, actually
definitely
that,
the players' fault. But we'll get into that in a minute.
I did see, actually. So we had the international break, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago? And I saw a tweet on the first...
An international break. We don't get many of those, do we?
Yeah, tell me about it. So that was our third one, but we haven't got another one until March now, apparently, or something.
That's a shame. We really need more of those.
Yeah, we really love them. But I have to say, so during that, I think the second week, so Amorim started with you lot during that international break, didn't he? So some of his players would have been away, but as Rashford hasn't been in the England team, and I think Casemiro's not in the Brazil team, so both of them tweeted on the Monday, and they were saying top session. They didn't do that under Ten Hag. What's happened? Was Ten Hag not doing top sessions?
No, it's just ridiculous PR is what it is. It's like these players that didn't perform under Ten Hag, they need to redeem themselves or, come across a certain way. They're like, to be fair, like to a lot of Man United fans, it's just like repeat from what we've seen before. And
you said this a lot, haven't you? You said they're just going to do the same thing.
Yeah, for a long time I've said this, and I don't think the players realise that we know what we're watching now. Like, we've seen it before. Like, if Rashford does another mad redemption, I foresee it lasting maybe 6 months to a year, and then he'll go back to being average again. I think the thing is, you can have tactics, you can have managers saying so much, but when it comes to the players on the pitch, like, if they've not got the right mentality, they'll never have the right mentality. There's certain things that you can't change people, right? You can train people, you can coach people, but you can't change people. And for me, and I always said this under Ten Hag, like, the reason I backed him is because I actually felt like he was trying to do something and the players just weren't going with it. And for me, it's not because the message isn't correct, it's because the players just aren't Man United players.
Do you reckon? So Rashford, who's been there a long time, he's had some really good seasons, but he seemed to sort of sink low and lower under old Eric.
He had one good season, and his one good season was with Eric Ten Hag. So the fact that he's sort of given up and sort of dropped the ball under Ten Hag's mantle, considering what Ten Hag did for him when he first came in, just shows kind of the measure of the man, really, for me. It
what
shows
about Bruno?
Just disloyalty.
Bruno was... he was on form before Ten Hag. He's one of your leading sort of goal-scoring midfielders, chance creating as well. Then under Ten Hag, his numbers completely dropped in a short window when Van Nistelrooy come in, which you might say is a manager bounce or whatever.
When you
but
say
his numbers started picking up again.
When you say its numbers dropped, what do you mean by that?
So I saw a set of stats comparing under Ten Hag compared to the 4 games under Ruud, and his percentage chances created, his goals, his assists.
Yeah, is that under Ten Hag's entire tenure or just from the beginning of this season?
I think it was last season. I can't remember what it was. I'll have to get it up. But there was a clear difference. Do you think Bruno played for the manager?
Yeah, I think
was
so.
he trying his hardest?
I think he was trying too hard. With Bruno, I think he's such an emotional player. I think that gets in the way of his game sometimes. So I can forgive Bruno because I can see the emotion from him. I can see the passion. I can see something from him, which is why you kind of give him that more patience. Whereas with Rashford, you talk about body language and stuff like that. You don't see it. Yeah, and that's the bit that really frustrates. It's frustrating
from a neutral point of view as well, if you can call me a neutral. I'm definitely, not a fan of United, but you know that I'm.
You hate us. You still resent us from that game that happened how many bloody years ago now?
Oh yeah, I don't forgive United for that. No, but that was more Fergie and the players you had at the time had to cheat your way to beat us, and Rooney dived. But anyway, that was what was that? The Battle of the Buffet they called that.
Stonewall penalty. Stonewall penalty.
Yeah. Stonewall was a great dive.
Deserved victors on the day.
Yep. So anyway, United with Bruno. So can I put first of all, we need to look at the issues at United, don't we? And it's been something which has gone on for years. It certainly wasn't all Ten Hag's fault, and I'm with you on that. However, I wasn't as in the camp that he was doing all of his side right, sort of thing. There was clear. We've spoken about years ago about the culture issues at United. There's clearly stuff outside the team, in the above and the board and in the whole club. Essentially, there's a bit of a rotten kind of culture going on. The wrong people being recruited. That's changed a little bit. We've seen, with the Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe and stuff. So that might take time, but that might be on the mend. Possibly, we can't really judge that just yet.
I think there's also been an improvement in the sort of structure behind sort of the club since Ten Hag's tenure. I think he has done things in terms of the academy and things behind the club, behind the scenes, that have improved us, but we're in such a low point considering the sort of levels we've achieved in the past. So so under Ten Hag, that's mostly what we're going to have to talk about, because we're going to get onto Amorim shortly. But over the last couple of years, I do agree with you. The players have to take some responsibility. There's, like you say, body language and performances as well. You want players to give their all every game, and you see it in patches. You see the team, we're all on the same wavelength. We're all working hard. They press for 15 minutes, but then they just start sinking. You think, well, these are international players. They can't be that bad. Yeah.
It's so the attitude and everything does make me worry.
I think a really good example of that was under Ralph Rangnick in his first game in charge. I think it was Brentford. I think, or was it Southampton or someone? And the first 20 minutes, you could see Ralph Rangnick's style of play, high press, really positive football. It lasted 20 minutes, and that was all of Ralph Rangnick's style of football we saw for the rest of the season. It lasted 20 minutes and that was it. Then he had to be like, well, that's about as much as these guys can do. I'm going to have to come to another solution to try and just get over the line.
And he was quite vocal, wasn't he, Rangnick, about the problems. He said United needed open heart surgery. There's real issues culturally and also with the players. He was quite vocal with it.
Yeah, he was. And I think he was laughed at a little bit. I don't think people took him seriously enough. And I think he was underrated because it turns out he was right, So
absolutely. And this has been something that's gone on for how many years now? It was 2013, was it? You won the league, or was it before that? 2011.
Yeah, it was. It was 2013. Alex Ferguson's last year.
That was it. So it's over 10 years of kind of decline, really. Obviously, there's issues with the stadium and a few other things. There's all sorts of stuff going on behind the scenes. But so tactically, I have issues with the way Ten Hag was trying to set the team up. You just couldn't see. Yes, you could see the players working hard in patches and stuff, but I couldn't see the kind of tactical, we're trying to play out from the back, but then they couldn't play out from the back, so they pass back to keeper, then he'd go long. They bought Xerxes, and he seemed to sort of do a bit of hold-up play, but he was kind of dropping deep. And then there were players around him, but they weren't overlapping. You weren't getting down the wings. You weren't doing counter-attacking. Under Solskjaer, you did have a style of play. You were doing the whole counter-attack. And I think that with the players you had, you weren't, you haven't got... I don't think you've got the elite players that you might say City, Liverpool, Arsenal have. You've got some individual brilliant players, but as a whole team, I think the standard's not quite there. So
that's fair.
I think playing that drop, more sitting back and countering with the players you've got as well, not just because of the levels, but in terms of the style of players, you've got, Garnacho and Rashford and the pace on the counter. It kind of makes sense to play that way Solskjaer was playing. And you were in a really good way for a while until the Ronaldo thing set you back. And I predicted that. So it's kind of like you see great moments of short cycles of performance from the players and tactically, but then under Ten Hag it all collapsed, didn't it?
Well, you say that, right? But I think Solskjaer was flattered by his second place. I remember watching a lot of the games then, and I don't in lockdown. We were decent when there was no crowds and stuff like that, which I think lends itself to this whole mentality thing. Once the crowds start coming back and the pressure starts increasing again, the performances weren't there. They dropped off again.
But didn't you finish second, was it? And I because you had was it Cavani up front, and then you were signing Sancho, and I thought this is building. Yeah, Solskjaer's building his team now, and then Ronaldo was kind of forced on him, and that completely changes the way you're going to attack because you can't counter with Ronaldo. He hasn't got the stamina and pace to keep it going, and also his style of play. It's not a counter-attacking way. He needs to get in the box. He needs that sort of support, and he's lethal in the box. But the whole front, the way you pressed, it had to change. And I think that was really the beginning of the end for Solskjaer.
Yeah, but Solskjaer was never going to win the league, even in his style of play.
No, I don't think so. I think it's a more simplistic style, the kind of sit back and counter and stuff. I don't mean that in a negative way.
So I don't think
it's as sophisticated as the way the top elite sides are playing.
Yeah, I think you can, because you can remember things in a different way as well, right? Like, I remember watching a lot of those games, and I remember a lot of criticism for Solskjaer because we never had a plan B. So all teams had to do was sit deep, and we could never do anything because the players
you could break them down. Yeah.
No, we never could, and there was always that criticism about us not being able to break teams down. Then you had players like Pogba, Lingard. Who else did we have that was just like players that just wanted to just do
Fred
their own
stuff,
thing?
Didn't you?
Fred I actually didn't have an issue with because he worked hard, but there was a lot of players that felt you got a sense that they thought they were bigger than the club. There was a toxicity there, and the sort of identity of what Manchester United was had gone, and the only reason it was masked over because of Ole Solskjaer and who he was and the history he had with the club. It made people feel there was still that identity there, but it had gone, and the players weren't right. It was toxic, and then when he left, obviously all the little patches that were covered up became very, very bare. And that's what it seemed to be, wasn't it? When you bring a new manager in, they sign the new players, and then you've just got these different players from different kind of philosophies coming in. So you've got a whole different range of players that they're not bought to play alongside each other. There wasn't a clear vision in place, a longer term vision, was there? Yeah, it's been a long decline to get to this point, but I still feel like our lowest point was before Erik ten Hag came in. I think that was our lowest point. I think we got our lowest point finish in Premier League history. So, and then some of the players, like I personally as a fan, I didn't really connect with any of the players or anything like that. Whereas after Ten Hag came in, I started to actually feel like a bit more of a connection to the players and the team. And it was a bit all over the place. Yeah, it was a bit chaotic, but there was something there to get behind.
Okay, so that's why you were kind of backing him where I wasn't. As a fan, you could kind of sense that, which I wouldn't be able to do because, I could see he was bringing a couple of youngsters through, but I'm looking at it on the pitch, and I don't think he engaged with the media very well either, which was possibly, something which was part of his...
It's interesting that because I've heard a few journalists say that he portrayed himself a different way in press conferences, and he was actually more personable than he let himself come across because he wanted to come across as this authoritarian or something. So I suppose you never know behind the scenes what the reality is like. I still think that for me, I'd have rather have seen 11 players go out the door and 11 new players come in than get rid of Ten Hag. Because I don't think that these players are capable of doing high levels of performances that Amorim has seen from Sporting. I think Amorim's an incredible manager, and I think he's probably definitely the best that's out there. But I don't think he's going to get a tune out of these players because I just don't think they're capable of it. So,
I mean,
there's a lot of
Ten Hag the thing which is worrying with Ten Hag is he was given a lot of time, wasn't he? The club actually started to back him more than they'd really done for most other managers. They backed him with time, and they also gave him money. What did he spend? What was it, 615 million or something?
Yeah, but no, I honestly, I don't prescribe to that argument. I just don't. I think the money that was spent. I mean, if you look at the money that we've spent with all of the managers, Ten Hag, Van Gaal, Mourinho, Solskjaer, they've all had a lot of money. Every single signing was just average. Well, I don't think Bahar, maybe Bruno Fernandes. I can't think of a decent signing we've had that's really shown something, if you see what I mean.
So under Ten Hag then, you had signings like Onana, you're pleased with him, right?
I am, yeah, but I mean, so there's a combination of things with our recruitment, right? And Amorim spoke really well about this. So Amorim said that when recruiting, we need to make sure that we're identifying and assessing the correct traits and getting the right people in, like statistically. So that tells me, that gives me a little, obviously that gives us a little bit of an insight. That tells me that perhaps our recruitment team were looking into the wrong things. Now, Ten Hag very much recruited on the base of personality, which I personally felt like at least there was something there in terms of the characters we were bringing in. They all had a bit of fire. Do you know what I mean? Anthony, for example.
Does he have fire? Does he? Anthony has fire.
Yeah, no, honestly, Anthony. Yeah, I think his defensive statistics as a winger, I think is something like in the top 90 percentile or something.
Right.
Yeah, honestly, it sounds crazy, I know, but his ability going forward has been terrible, and I'm not saying he's a good signing. That's not what I'm saying.
He's certainly worth that 90 million or whatever it was you spent on him.
No, he isn't. That's not what I'm saying. You're twisting my words. I'm talking about a characteristic, right? And
he's not showing it now in training. Sorry, Dan. I know from the outside. I know I'm on the outside and everything. I'm not a United fan, but I also think that there's a good side to that in a sense that I'm not going to be clouded by anything. Maybe the emotional side with Anthony. Why isn't he getting back into the team? So he was dropped by Ten Hag, who signed him. Now he's not. Where's his mentality and that fire? In training and stuff like that.
But that's not to do with mentality. And
yes, it is.
No. His ability isn't there. His ability is not there. Right?
Why isn't his ability there? He was a Brazil international.
That doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean he's good enough for the Premier League. His skill set is not suited to the Premier League.
So Arsenal can bring through Ethan Nwaneri. You can bring through Mainu, and they have more ability than Anthony. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that their traits are more suited to the Premier League. For example, Anthony's got like a really quick 5-yard sprint speed, right?
Yeah, and he's a pacey
every
player.
Single time.
He's got a good left foot.
No.
What he needs is an overlap.
Can you let me finish my point? So
right, go on.
He's not a outright pacey player. His first 5 yards, his burst speed is good, and then whenever he goes and pulls away from a player, they catch up with him right away because his actual sprint speed isn't very good.
Really?
So, yeah, from what I've watched, from what I've seen, right, he'll get off at the mark quick, and then people will catch up with him, and then he'll always cut back, and then he just can't do anything because he's so predictable. But that worked at Ajax. If you look at his highlights from Ajax, his ability was great. But I don't even want to get into a debate about his ability because I don't think he's any good. But what I do think is he's quite an aggressive player, right? He's got like a bit of a bite to him, a bit of a fight, right? So that's my point. Okay, well, you haven't obviously watched enough of him, but it's like Martinez, for example, as well. There's a bit of a bite and a fight.
Well, I see a bit of a fight.
Well.
He's a bit of an idiot. He puts other players in danger at times with the challenges he makes. But I just want to hang on Anthony for a second because yes, there's some players that Ten Hag signed which you think, I can see the reason behind it. He spent a lot of money on Anthony, but then this is where the coaching issue is. He's clearly got ability, Anthony. I don't buy what you're saying there. He's got ability, but the style of play you were playing... you're going to let me finish? So the style of play you were playing, what Anthony needs, he always wants to cut in on his left foot, but because you didn't really have an overlapping wing-back or some sort of winger going on the outside, all the players...
But Dello's an overlapping wing-back.
But they didn't play that way enough because Anthony was always trying to cut in. He was so left-footed, he couldn't go down the line, so the defending team could just... All right, you're not coming in on the inside then. So he'd stand on slightly more to the right when they're defending against him, so he couldn't cut in on his left foot, and that just nullified him. That comes down to coaching. You need to coach Anthony, coach the team to play around. If you want to get the most out of your players, that's another kind of thing that I've got against Ten Hag. I don't think he's a good coach from what I was seeing.
Yeah, but I don't see Anthony. I don't see Anthony now getting into this Amorim team either.
Right. Maybe, but I think Amorim. If he's a good coach, you'll get more out of him. Put it that way.
Well, the thing is though, they're totally Ten Hag is clearly a good coach because of his success at Ajax and in the Champions League and stuff like that. He's done it at the top level, so he's clearly a good coach.
I think the Premier League's tougher than the Champions League for most games. You're going to have tougher day in, day out games in the Premier League.
Okay, right. Other than the obvious ones, name me a decent Premier League manager. Just off the top of your head, name me one that you rate.
What, outside of the top sides?
Outside of the top six, name me one that you rate.
Iraola, Bournemouth.
Okay, Iraola. Do you think Iraola could do at Ajax what Ten Hag did?
Yes.
I disagree.
Okay,
I don't
then.
think I don't see him as being that ability, but like I just think like I'm always going to defend Ten Hag anyway, because personally I think it was the players that was the problem. But my point originally, before we got onto all of this, was we've always recruited poorly. So yeah, Ten Hag had money to spend, but so did Mourinho, so did Van Gaal, and our recruitment has been terrible.
So that's one of the real problems, isn't it, is recruitment? Yeah,
exactly. And the recruitment is not, I don't think, as much as the manager needs to have a say in that and needs to have an input in that, because ultimately they're the ones that have got to pick those players. And, you know, when they don't work, you know, it's down to the manager. They're the ones that, you know, it comes down to at the end. When you're recruiting them, like, there's no way Arteta is the main thought process behind all of his signings, right?
Yeah, well,
Arteta doesn't make those decisions, does he?
Yeah, so him and Edu, that was one thing. So they created a plan, a 5-year plan.
Yeah, but he doesn't make those decisions on his own, is what I mean.
No. Yeah, so and that's what I think, we'll get onto the fixes, but that's one issue where it wasn't a long-term plan in place. So Ten Hag's inheriting players that didn't really suit a style whatever style he was trying to play anyway. And then he's signing players, and then he didn't create a system that enabled a lot of those players, such as Anthony, but he's not the only one, to get the best out of him. Onana being another one. You didn't play out the back in a way which Onana's brought in, because he's really good at playing out, right? But the whole players, the defence you had and everything like that, you couldn't get the most of that. So
yeah, but
there's so many issues based on the player.
That was more down to injuries at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know. Okay, that's something but all teams have injuries, you know, and it does impact. You know, you see City now and Arsenal. We've dropped points this season.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of injuries.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. But, I mean, Ten Hag, you can't just put it down to injuries, can you? I agree with you that players need to take responsibility.
Yeah, definitely. In his first season, remember, Ten Hag got third. Do you know what I mean? He won our first trophy for 5 years. He got third place
yeah, but
in the Premier League.
Was... You didn't get third based on merit, really, in some ways. There's a lot of measures statistically where you were overachieving. Rashford carried you a lot that season with individual brilliance, which isn't coached. It was if you go back, Rashford carried that team a long way.
So you don't think Erik ten Hag had any impact?
Of course, he had some impact, but not a third place impact.
You can't pick and choose when you can say a manager has an impact and doesn't to suit your argument.
Okay, look, Ten Hag for me is clearly a good manager. I think that United were above him. I think he wasn't able. He was punching above his weight, and I know I've said this before. But, okay, so now we've got Amorim in. We've got this more tactical coach, so he's been kind of promoted in the media, at least anyway. There's this kind of tactician, you know, a bit of a... 3-4-3 keeps coming up as his kind of brand. Is that something which excites you?
I don't know, it's hard to get excited. It's hard to get excited because we've been here before. Like, I was excited by Ten Hag. I was excited by Mourinho, you know. I was even excited by Ole because when he came in as an interim, he won something like 7 or 8 games on the bounce, and I thought, oh my God, this is the start of something. You know,
Ole's at the wheel, yeah.
I've seen it too many times now to get excited yet. And even when you hear him speak, and he speaks so well, you just like, oh no, I better not get too excited just yet. You really have to. I've got a real sense of caution this time round.
Yeah. I think that's wise. And the thing is, he's got a lot to fix. So we've just said, so the main problems we've got, recruitment. So now he needs a say, doesn't he? We'll get onto the fixes in a second, but so he needs. One thing I would say
in terms of recruitment, obviously Amorim's got this benefit of we've just had this transition with Ineos as well, and actually with Ineos already from the summer window we've literally just had. I do feel like there's more of a structure in the recruitment, and I feel there's more of a plan than there's ever been.
Right. Okay.
Things like signing Lenny Yoro. Okay, he's not had a game yet where he's been injured. But that was a centre back that Real Madrid wanted, and we managed to sort of get that in place. Ugarte was a good signing. Xerxes was a signing that I think is going to need time, but it was a signing that Ten Hag didn't want, for example. I don't think Ten Hag was keen on Ugarte or Xerxes because buying Ugarte meant getting rid of McTominay, and he didn't want that to happen.
Right, okay.
He didn't want Xerxes, he wanted Danny Welbeck. So...
Oh, right. Is that a wise signing? I mean, I don't get me wrong.
Mate,
we both love Danny Welbeck, but
look
getting
at how
him
he's doing
back at
this
United,
season. We could love it. We could deal with him right now. Do you know what I mean? We could do with him. But no, you're right. You're right. It's probably maybe not a forward step, but I still love him.
I know.
Okay. Back,
so agreeing to disagree on Ten Hag because you don't think he was really the main problem. I think he was a key part of the problem. I do agree with you that the players need to take responsibility. There's clearly mentality problems there. So main problems, we're sort of highlighting the main problems to draw this section to a close. What we've got, recruitment's a major issue. So that we'll get on to how we're going to fix recruitment. We've got
players' attitude
of the players, which is partly, well, I mean, clearly the players have to take responsibility for that, but that's also the coach to provide motivation. If you've got a good coach, that coach can help get that fire in your belly kind of thing, passion, and help to draw it out. It is down for the players. Whenever Keane mentions it, it's absolutely right. But the manager needs that in his locker as well, to get that out. That's what a good leader does.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see how Amorim is different to Ten Hag on that front. So we've got the kind of motivational side, the managing sort of player to player, one-to-one coaching, if you like. We've got recruitment. We've got stuff outside of United that we're not going to get onto today because there's, like we said, there's a bit of a transition in the boardroom and things like that as well. You've got a new, is it sporting director in with the chap from Newcastle? Dan Ashworth,
yeah.
So there's a lot going on. So let's focus on the fixes on the pitch, shall we?
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, first thing then, what needs to happen with recruitment then, Dan?
How would I fix it? So I think there has already been steps towards the right thing. I think having a footballing director, which we haven't had until this summer, which seems bonkers, really, if you think about it.
It seems to be an important role in modern football clubs, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, like, look at Liverpool, right? They recruited for a certain way of playing and an idea, and even in getting a manager, they were able to take a new manager in with the exact same players and still maintain a level of performance.
Yeah, because
of the structure that's in place and the sort of like bigger term thinking.
Yeah, the bigger picture, isn't it? Yeah, and
exactly.
That's the thing, because managers don't have a long lifespan as, in their role at clubs. So I think that's really the push towards these sporting directors, isn't it? So you've got a longer term plan. If a manager just gets sacked, then you don't want to start again at square one. These managers need to some extent, be on terms with the sporting director.
Yeah.
To kind of, but ideally that needs to be a joint process. That's one thing which I can bring in a little bit about Arsenal here. We had Edu, obviously he's recently left for a kind of a bigger challenge in a sense because he's got a kind of whole group of clubs to be in charge of now. But him and Mikel had created a long-term vision and they worked sort of shoulder to shoulder kind of thing. They created a list. They wanted the type of player. You mentioned about the mentality and the kind of personality of the players. That was key as well, but tactically they need to fit the system that they were trying to do. So they were kind of seeing eye to eye in that, and I think that's what United need as well. They've got Dan Ashworth, but he needs to work with Amorim, and it needs to be a two-way process. It can't just be one person telling the other. They need to listen to Amorim. That's why you hire this tactical, brilliant coach. You want to listen to him.
It will be interesting to see because Amorim's really Ineos's guy now. Like, Ineos inherited Ten Hag. They've gone out and they've got Amorim.
Yeah.
So
it's their man, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. And obviously he plays this 3-4-3. So is that now how we recruit? Are we planning around this 3-4-3 thing? Are we recruiting?
I think that's what needs to happen.
For this?
Yeah.
And is that now the plan for the club going forward? So that, say, if in 2 years' time Amorim doesn't work out, are we still going to stick with that? And are we going to get another manager to fit the same system? Or is it going to be the same thing in 2 years' time? I think it's very hard to see if this... I think the idea of Ineos and, the footballing structure that Ineos have put in, so having a footballing director, a technical director, having this idea of a footballing idea and structure behind everything else is great, but is it going to be consistent? And I don't think we'll know that until, a few years' time, because at the minute they recruited in the summer supposedly for Ten Hag, for one system, and now all that money they've spent and all those people they've brought in is now going to go to a 3-4-3 system.
Do you think it's likely, or he should be targeting the Champions League as a minimum this year, or is that kind of like,
no,
where are you feeling?
Yeah, so that's something I wanted to add as a fix. I think one thing we need to fix is expectation.
Yeah,
I
good
think
point.
Because of the size of the club that Man United is, I think we can all get a bit carried away and sort of live in the past a bit and think, oh, we should be getting top 4 every.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the level we're at now.
I think that's realistic, and I don't mean that as a dig. It's quite funny, but I think United need to be a bit humble, and they need to understand where they are and build slowly. And if you do somehow get into, I mean, it looks like the league's a bit more unpredictable this season. You might find your way pushing for the top 4, but if you don't, that's fine. You need to sort of stick by that and say, okay, it's progress. I want to see progress on the pitch, not just in the position you finish in. So you want to see
that's a very Arsenal mentality, I think.
Yeah, at the position you finish in. Okay, well,
mentality.
however you want to, I don't know how you mean that, but in terms of if you start showing that you're playing the right way and you're seeing progress with the players, the mentality, the system, the position on the table will start also moving in the right direction. And that's what's happened at Arsenal. So United need to follow a similar trail, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I think, you got to bear in mind that when he started, he was 14th in the league or something.
With that in mind, that's exactly it as well, yeah.
So that's something that it's not like he's starting from nothing with a pre-season and everything else. He's starting at 14th and he's implementing a whole new system. Like he said himself, even if he'd rather implement the system from day one and struggle now than adapt and make something up that can get us results, because if he does it that way, then by the time he goes to implement his system, say next season, he'll then struggle then. So
yeah, exactly.
His mindset is let's struggle now. So and to be honest, I'm all for that, because as long as we don't get relegated, it can't get any worse.
Yeah, and actually, in some ways, not being in Europe, I know financially in the club, United and all that, and for their share price, because they're on the New York Stock Exchange or whatever, aren't they? But I don't care about all of that. I'm looking at it from a football point of view, and I think it might be beneficial if you're not in Europe to give him that time to build a team. So if you don't finish in, obviously if you do finish in Europe, great in a sense, but especially if it's the Europa Conference or something like that, playing on those Thursdays, I don't think that's going to be helpful as he's trying to build a new system of new players and stuff, unless you're going to blood a load of young players,
No, but you've got all of these rules about like financial fair play now, haven't you? So it's about the financial income, which is why they're going to want to be there, so that they can
I get that,
spend as much as they do. And this is another thing. This is the financial pressure that the club is under because of, unfortunately, people at the top, which, like you say, we won't get into today. But that's another thing, isn't it? So
and the
you've got to get into
dished out.
Yeah. So I do think we need to go for something this season in terms of either Europa or a cup or something that will get us into some kind of European tournament, because I feel like that is maybe more realistic than sort of league success.
I'd agree with that.
Particularly where we've had success in sort of the cups, even under Ten Hag in the last couple of years. These guys know how to win a cup tournament. So I think maybe that's where our focus needs to be this season. And obviously on top of just getting the shape right in the players learning the system and things. So, but I think in terms of the league, I think we need to be realistic. I don't think we can expect to get top 4 or anything like that, because we're doing something totally new now. And I think it's like short-term pain, long-term gain sort of a thing.
So I think if you need support to support your defenders, if they're not up to it, you need to, they're not up to play the way you want. Change your system, whether it is a back 5, whatever it is, to suit the style. And Arteta did that, and we won the FA Cup that year, beating Chelsea, Man City, because we went back to a back 5. That enabled us to learn how to pass it out. And then eventually, when we were able to sign a couple of players, we went back to a back 4. You see the team evolving, and the system, the philosophy, the underlying philosophy stayed. Like you were saying, it can't just be short-term results and and chopping and changing philosophy. It needs to be a solid philosophy at United. And if you need to adapt your system, you can still change to a 5 or to a 4 or whatever and still have the same philosophy. And that's what I want to see. I want to see a clear philosophy that Amorim's trying to implement onto this team. If he wants to pass up from the back, if he wants to counter, he sounds like he's going to be more of a sort of progressive style manager, wanting to pass out and progress up the field that way. So,
well, he talks a lot about possession, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. He's a possession-based manager from his previous experience in different clubs and that. So if that's the case, I just hope to see that the United board, the sporting director and that back him, and they sign the players together. They need to be on the same page, like I said earlier, singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a gradual improvement, and I think we're only really going to see like an upward trajectory maybe in a couple of years' time. I think it's going to take time, but one thing I will say into your point about maybe playing with a back 5, he has already said, there's an interview he did with Gary Neville on Sky Sports when he first came into the club, and he spoke about, we can play with wing backs, wingers as wing backs or full backs. We can play as a back 5 or with a 3 and a 4, depending on who you're playing. So that's obviously something that is already on his mind and he's already planning on doing, which is great. But I mean, to be honest with you, this season is almost a write-off in terms of, I don't necessarily think we can expect great things in terms of achievements. I think we just need to hit the refresh button, and I think the important thing is not to get too excited and put too much pressure and say, Amorim's here now, we're going to get top 4.
You need to be realistic.
And then end up in 8th, and all of a sudden everyone's disappointed because we're not 4th. I think we need to give him a longer time than that, and wherever we end up this season, we end up, and then we'll see then if there's any progression, if there's some sort of improvement in how we're playing. Let's have a look and see if we maybe do any recruitment in January, maybe, I don't know. And then after a proper pre-season and a summer transfer window and everything, let's see how he starts next season. But
I think there'll be more. You're right, and I think that's another fix, really. So should we finish there with the final fix? Is to be realistic with your expectations. Give him time. Like we said. So in summary, you need to sort the recruitment out. The partnership between Amorim and the sporting director, he needs to be given time, and expectations need to be realistic. We talked about the defence and the structure as well. He needs to be able to have the freedom to adapt, and we also said that he needs to be backed and not be sort of what's the word I'm looking for? He needs to be allowed to drop the big name players, whether that's a Rashford, whether it's because if Rashford can't perform under Amorim, that's clearly proof that that's another one of our fixes, that we think it's probably time Rashford goes. The thing for his own career anyway.
For me personally, the proof is already there. For me personally,
I think I agree with you on that one. Yeah,
it's not like he's performed under previous managers and then just dropped his performance with Ten Hag. He's not performed for previous managers, so I think the proof is already there for that. I think saying, Amorim should be able to get a tune out of Rashford. And if he doesn't, then that's it. I think that is it. I think. I don't think the manager is the issue with Rashford. I think Rashford is the issue with Rashford.
Yeah, and I think it'd be good for him to get to another club anyway, and kind of because he looks like he's got the world on his shoulders and stuff, and he's felt like that for years by just looking at his body language. And one other final fix I do want to add actually is Casemiro's the same thing. I think he needs to go.
Yeah, I think I also listed him in my players. I think I said Casemiro. So Casemiro and Rashford both, and it's funny how those are the two that put out that really happy post about training. Oh, what an excellent session!
Top session.
It's just PR to cover themselves and protect themselves, I think.
I didn't like it. I have to admit I didn't like it. So I think it's also when a new manager comes in normal business organisations, a new manager likes to put his or her style in place, and often you see some of the senior people underneath them get moved on. And I think that might need to happen to kind of help you change the culture as well. You need to bring in, that's I think another thing that Arteta had in his, to help him build this new philosophy, a new kind of way of doing things. He had a lot of young players and he was signing a lot of young players. He was getting rid of the older players that kind of had the cliques, if you like, in the dressing room, or the cliques, if you call it that. The kind of, they controlled the dressing room,
this is something that Amarim's done really well at Sporting, is he's utilised the academy so well. And obviously, United as an academy, there is a real opportunity. There's a real well to dip into there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe that's another fix. Maybe the fix is to really utilise the academy to bring in fresh blood.
Good point.
To freshen up the sort of, not toxicity, but to freshen up the dressing room and to maybe remove that more sort of the more stale player. Let's put it that way.
I don't mean that in a horrible way, but in terms of to help build a new culture, a new philosophy, having young players who are going to soak up the new knowledge, the new way of doing things, and bring that kind of freedom and excitement into a dressing room, as well as they're less likely to get injured. There's that kind of add-on as well. They're less likely to get injured. Arsenal benefited with a good injury record in recent seasons because we've got so many young players. I think that's a factor as much as anything.
But also using players from an academy, like, that so helps with your identity.
Absolutely, and it gets the fans on side as well. It
gets the fans on side. It helps with that sense of identity. I mean, in terms, especially with United, in terms of our culture and our history of bringing up sort of young blood and stuff like that.
Class of '92 and that. Yeah. Watch this space. It'd be interesting to see how he develops aside the season.
Yeah, we're going to win the league.
Oh, yeah. Amarim's at the wheel. Well, I think it's time for some fantasy football tips. We've still got Sam in top spot, Slotty too hotty. He's flying at the moment. Sess isn't here to show how angry he is with that. Sess's face gets so angry when he sees Sam at top. With that, I think it's time for John's Juicy Tips.
Oh,
juicy.
Lovely jubbly, Johnny.
John's Juicy Tips.
Yeah.
Right, the Premier League is hotting up with a full round of midweek fixtures. So here are my juicy tips for the next 2 game weeks. In defence, I vote for Pedro. Yeah, Pedro Porro for Spurs. As the season has gone on, Pedro has pushed higher and higher up the pitch. He's basically a winger now. And this month, Spurs have fixtures against leaky defences such as Bournemouth, Southampton and Wolves. Field, there's a new best budget pick, so you can create space in your team for all the premium players. And that man is Amad Diallo for United. It looks like Amarim has him as first choice on the right wing, and he's only 4.9 million. He's provided 4 assists in the last 3 game weeks. And up front, my pick again is Ollie Watkins. He's been on a poor run of form recently, but he has 2 juicy home games the next week against Brentford and Southampton. Brentford and Southampton have a combined total of 2 points away from home so far this season. So it's time for him to turn it around and score some goals. Juicy.
Thanks for that, John, as always. What do you think of those tips then, Dan?
They were lovely.
All right, that's swiftly moving on. Thanks for listening to our episode, everyone. If you could give us a like or follow or whatever you are listening or seeing our material on, that'd be great. Any of the socials that you follow us on, that'd be fantastic.
Follow, subscribe, follow, click, follow, subscribe.
You follow us, don't you, Dan?
Yeah, I do. And I subscribe.
There you go. See, that's how you get far in life. So thanks, everyone.
Now I feel like it's a little bit egotistical because I just follow and subscribe myself, really.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But, yeah, it's just what it is, isn't it? So, thanks for listening, everyone. It's goodbye from me.
Oh, and it's goodbye from me too.